Hi, everyone. I'm Stephen Foster, and today I have the now retired Fred Pfeiffer on the phone, who was the chief weather forecaster at KRTV in Great Falls, Montana. He's a Vietnam veteran and had a 15-and-a-half-year career in which he also got to interview a distinguished list of celebrities, musicians, and journalists, the likes of David Letterman, Paul Harvey, Jungle, Jack Hanna, and Hank Williams Jr., to name a few. How you feeling today, Fred?
Oh, Stephen, I feel good, and it's nice to talk to you. Certainly nice to meet you on the channel here.
That's great, and it's how I even discovered you. We will get into later. This is great to be able to talk to you like this. How long have you been? Were you born in Montana?
Yes, I was born right here in Great Falls,
Oh,
and
wow.
when I was two, the family moved to a place that some of your listeners may have heard of, Cutbank, Montana, which used to have the honors of the coldest place in the United States.
Oof.
And grew up there, went through grade school and junior high there, and then we moved back to Great Falls when I started my sophomore year of high school.
Never been to Montana. Pictures I've seen, it looks beautiful, though. It's a plan to get there for a visit sometime.
Well, there's just about 1 million people here, and I know in the Detroit area you have better than 4 million in the metro area. So it's pretty sparsely populated here.
We're getting a little stacked up over here. Yeah.
I imagine you are.
I think our roads are a good sign of that. Especially we're in this winter now where it's just pothole hell right now. So
Looked like it was raining there.
it is. We've been jumping from anywhere from 0 degrees to about 50, sometimes just in 2 days. So that's what they say about Michigan.
Oh, that's warm.
Ugh.
January 1st, it was 27 below here.
27 below.
Yep, yes, sir. And today it's 40 degrees, and we have a southwest wind, which comes up the slopes of the Rockies and warms us up. So all of our snow is pretty much has all melted off. So
Listen to you.
we like it here.
You haven't lost a lick. You slip right back into the meteorological voice.
Well,
That's great.
I've been doing the radio thing since high school in 1965. So
Mm.
so the 15 years at KRTV was just the end of my career.
Mm.
I started in high school on radio.
How long? So that's how long you were. How long were you in the business before you got to do the interview portion?
Which interview?
Well,
With
what
Johnny
was?
Harra or who?
Yeah. All right. Let's go back and say what were maybe one of the first couple ones that you conducted.
Oh, well, that would have been at radio at, well, let me think here. Let's see, at KBMN in Bozeman, I was there for about a half a year when I started college and ran out of money, but interviewed a person that you may have heard of who was also from Montana, and that was Chet Huntley. And he came to Bozeman. He used to be on the Huntley Brinkley Evening News. And he came to Bozeman and said he was going to start a resort area outside of Bozeman called Big Sky, and a ski area and very expensive homes. And everybody said, sure, of course. Well, Chet Huntley has passed away, but his legacy lives on. There is a Big Sky. It's very big and it's very expensive.
Hmm. Yeah, you would. What year was it that you had interviewed Paul Harvey?
Paul Harvey would have been about 1973, I
Oh,
guess,
wow.
when we started. We started an all-talk news format, 2.5 hours of news in the morning, and I was a news director, and I was told that we were going to do this. I didn't think it would fly, but it did. It really did. 2.5 hours, and we had a program or a segment called Morning People. It was about a 5-minute segment or 10-minute segment. And Paul Harvey was my first guest.
Oh,
And
I
that's why.
listened. Yeah, I listened to that interview. It was a really good discussion. That guy seemed pretty nice, at least in the interview.
Oh, no, Paul Harvey was an excellent person. And the station that I worked for was Clear Channel and at 690 on the dial, so it covered parts of Missouri, Arkansas, Oklahoma, and Kansas. And Paul Harvey started in Tulsa, So he had friends in Coffeyville, Kansas, where KGGF was. And I used to feed him a lot of goofy things that happened around the four-state area. And so he knew me quite well. And he was just a total gentleman, and I miss hearing him at noon on the radio every day.
Yeah. If you could think back throughout your career, especially regarding interviews, is there somebody that stands out as like a good interview for you?
Oh my! How about Muhammad Ali?
You interviewed Muhammad Ali, huh?
Yeah. Well, Stephen, I got to tell you, this would have been back about. I'm trying to think now. This would have been probably about 1970 or 71 here in Great Falls. That he stopped at the airport on the way through to Seattle or somewhere, and so we had a notification that Muhammad Ali was going to be at the airport. And back in those days, we used reel-to-reel tape recorders, of course, and tape we thought was expensive, and our bosses would make us use it over and over. So I have no record of that, but I can still see him at the airport. He was so funny. He jumped up on one of the sofas and started doing his boxing routine, and it was so funny, so funny.
That's so
cool. I wish I had that interview.
He seems. What was I watching? They run the reruns of what would be, I guess,
60 Minutes?
Oh no, actually this is on, I think, TV Land. They play Sonny and Cher, those old episodes from, I believe, the 70s. Sure. He was a guest in there a couple times, but that guy could slip into a character and, recite lines as good as any other actor,
Oh, he was terrific.
Great sense of humor.
And he wasn't there very long. Just to stop over for fuel. But I still remember it, just like it was yesterday.
Here's one that stands out for me. In fact, I find it bizarrely fascinating, and it was your interview in 1980 with Elvis impersonator Johnny Harra, who I, at first, thought was Elvis himself in a prosthetic nose doing a gag or a bit. I watched this thing just in awe. This video has currently over 84,000 views, almost 200 comments, and I can't get over how a person unrelated could have such similar traits as Elvis. Have you read any of the comments on that video?
Oh yeah, I get an email on all of them, and I chuckle. And some of them, they say he's Elvis, and they say he's not Elvis, and I still remember the night that I saw him in concert in Casper when I was working at K2 Radio and TV, and shot some video of him performing in a small nightclub. And then the next day we sat down and did the interview. And just as a joke, I put it on YouTube, and never believing that it would get that kind of response. And
right. Well, it's sort of a phenomenon, because there are people who are convinced in those comments that it's actually Elvis in makeup, and really believe that conspiracy that Elvis didn't die in 1977 is very strange.
Well, I know it, but I have to tell you, I have to take you back to my childhood, that I was a fan of Elvis when I was a kid. And we used to go see all of his movies, and then we would come home and I would, with the neighborhood kids, act out the movies. And I know they weren't the greatest movies, but I had all of his Sun records and things like that. So I was a great Elvis fan.
Mm-hmm.
I got to see him twice, live in concert, Elvis. Once in Oklahoma City when I was down in Coffeyville, and once in Wichita, Kansas. Once when he was thin, and once when he was a little chunky.
No.
And I have to say that I don't care which concert that I saw, his voice never failed him. I mean, he was just a great entertainer. I've been to Graceland and got to put my hands on the railing where he went up, and so I was just a big fan.
Are you familiar with that the conspiracy theory about his twin? Did you know Elvis was a twin? This is true. His brother Jesse was born first, stillborn.
Correct.
And a half hour later, Elvis was born. But the theory says that Jesse didn't die at birth, that their parents could only afford to raise one of the boys. So they gave one up for adoption. Now, that's who died. This is the theory, is what I'm saying. And that's who died in 1977. Elvis seized the opportunity to take the place of his unknown twin and lived out the rest of his life in relative obscurity. So, but this is where it's leading it. Every time there was an Elvis sighting, after that, it was actually either the real Elvis or someone like a Johnny Harra, which I think you asked Johnny about in that interview, if you thought he was responsible for sightings.
Right, in Denver, he mentioned in the that they accidentally put him on the front page of the Rocky Mountain News in Denver, Colorado.
See, and that's
he
what
said
I mean.
He went out and bought 50 copies.
Yeah, that's right. Keep for himself. That's part of the phenomenon. There was even a movie made about that whole theory in 2014 called The Identical with Ray Liotta and Ashley Judd, pretty much following that exact story. Yeah, I mean, personally, I think there had never been somebody like an Elvis before. So the idea of his passing was a lot for his fans to take in. I think sometimes it's easier to believe something more outlandish than a paltry truth, huh?
like the sightings of an older Elvis on the second floor of Graceland, years later, and all of these things. But it was, he was such an entertainer, and he had maybe I should say, from what I've learned, that he had some people around him that maybe a bad influence. I don't know, but
just the bodyguards you're talking?
Kind of, yeah, some of those people that were around him and wrote books and and that kind of thing.
Oh.
But I have to tell you, it's kind of it makes me think, well, gosh, maybe I really was talking to Elvis. If so, that's pretty cool.
Well, hey, truth is stranger than fiction. I think Elvis would be, 83 today. Elvis, if you're listening to this, call me. So,
Stephen, I can still remember looking out this dance hall where he performed was on the second floor, and I was waiting for him to arrive, and I happened to look out the window, and he arrived, Johnny Harra arrived, in an old beat-up Plymouth car, and he said in the interview that he had a motorhome. I never saw the motorhome, but he was wearing a long fur or fake fur coat that went almost to his ankles, and I'm thinking that's probably he was in costume, had his jumpsuit on or whatever, and that covered it up. I don't know, but I thought, Elvis isn't going to arrive in a beat-up old Plymouth.
Right.
But then if there's a conspiracy and he's trying to conceal himself, maybe he would. I don't know.
I heard about the motorhome. There was, I saw an interview with a couple of husband and wife that went to go see a Johnny Harra show, and they talked to him afterwards, and he kind of befriended them, and they invited him over for dinner. And it's funny, the woman winds up going on to say that she wound up doing all of his laundry from his motorhome, and the house was just hanging full with Elvis jumpsuits. It must have been a pretty surreal experience. So,
well, he does resemble him.
He uncannily resembles him. Except for he looks like he's wearing a prosthetic nose. And ultimately you see him perform and you're like, yeah, that's not Elvis's voice exactly. He didn't carry himself with the power. But
a nice man. He was a nice man.
So they say, by all accounts, a great guy. Yeah, great guy. Yeah, there's still his obituary on a website when he passed in 2011, and there's a lot of comments, a lot of people that met him and just rave about him. He's a good-hearted dude, which is good to hear.
I think there was a comment too that I saw on there that someone was either a bodyguard of Johnny's or knew him very well, and so he was a real person.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yep. Well, so we talked about this a little bit before we got going, but what are you doing with yourself? How are you enjoying your retirement?
Oh, sure. I don't have to shave every day. I did shave for this.
for a radio interview. People, ladies and gentlemen.
Have you seen David Letterman? I mean, That's ridiculous when you
Oh,
retire.
growing out his Santa Claus beard. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. Well, he's got a place about 50 miles from here.
Oh.
That's how I know him. I mean, I was on his top 10 list at one time.
I did see the
years
top 10
ago.
list. It was Fred Pfeiffer. It was number 6 or something like that.
It was 6, yeah.
Yeah, that was funny. They brought in. Go ahead.
And that's how he knew me because my picture was in the paper with a forecast every day. And he got the Great Falls Tribune back in New York and had an anemometer and a weather station at his ranch here. And so he knew who I was. And it took me 7 years to get that interview because of all the things that happened in his life. But I was going to do it at his ranch here in Montana, but Jude Brennan, his executive producer, after talking to her over 7 years, she said, how about if David just flies you back to New York and you do the interview here with our people, and that way he's happy. And I said, can I bring my wife? And they said, sure. So David Letterman flew my wife and I back, and we did the interview with him after a show. I did after the show that he had taped, and then we went the next night and got to see him in person, and then got a backstage tour of the Blue Room. And but it was awesome to be on the stage of the Ed Sullivan Theater where the Beatles and Motown people had been on there, and it's just
the history,
awesome
the history trapped in vibrations in that room, man. Yeah, for sure.
Oh my, still gives me goosebumps to think about it. It really does, Stephen.
Was David a good? Seemed like a good guy in person?
Yeah, he was. You know, people say, "Were you nervous?" And I said, "No." But you know, the funniest part of it is, you know, the people here in Montana, we don't all run around in bib overalls, Stephen. But when he had finished taping the show, he came in the room and they had all set it up. I was all sitting there, and my boss had put me in a pinstripe suit, new shoes, new glasses, the whole thing. And David Letterman walked in, and I said, "Hi, Mr. Letterman. Is it okay if I call you David?" And he said, "Sure, Fred. Gee, nice suit." And he came in with a shirt and a tie on. And he said, "Hey, Bob, go get my coat." So he wasn't going to be outdone by looking the same, or, you know, looking there, sitting in a shirt and a tie while I had a very, very nice pinstripe suit on. And so, and he did say to me, he said, "Well, how long do you want to talk?" And I said, "Well, Dave, the show runs 28 minutes and 48 seconds. And he said, "Well, we'll go as long as you want." And I said, "Well, how will I know when we're done?" He said, "When I take the microphone off and walk out of the room." I said, "Whoop, we're not going to go that route. Let's go 28:54. And so I asked Jude Brennan, one of his executive producers who was taking notes, and I said, you know, "Give me a countdown when we're running out of time." And after it was over, she said, "Is there any way you can take his wool socks out of the picture?" And I said, "No, that's part of David Letterman."
Wow, trying to really manage the image, huh?
Trying to. Didn't work, did it? If you look at it, you'll see he's still got those famous socks on. Cashmere.
Are you familiar with any of our media personalities here in Detroit? We have Chuck Gatica was like our biggest meteorologist out of or Sonny Elliott.
I mentioned.
Yeah.
Yes, I've heard of Sonny. But my connection with Detroit is my father and his brother grew up in Lima, Ohio, which is close to Akron. And I know that when I was back in Ohio, that my uncle used to be able to get Detroit television, I think, with an antenna. Does that sound right?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Well, Allen County is right there on the lines, western line of Oklahoma. But I've been back in your part of the country this time of the year, and your weather is cold, my friend.
Yeah, it gets pretty bitter. We get all the extremes, man. This past summer we reached, 90 plus degrees for weeks at a time. It's tough transitioning from that into now. I have cabin fever, and usually around now is a good time to get out of Michigan if you can for a couple weeks. But yeah,
that's 40 degrees here.
Yeah, I mean, see, I can handle that above freezing.
And the humidity is only 49%.
Yeah.
So it's a dry cold, Stephen.
Mm-hmm. Are you familiar with? Okay, so another one of our big anchors was a guy named Bill Bonds from Channel
I've
7.
heard that name.
Yeah, well,
Yes.
he supposedly was the inspiration behind Will Ferrell's character in the movie Anchorman, Legend of Ron
Oh
Burgundy.
yeah.
Yeah, that's
Yes.
what he has said before he modeled him after that. But yeah, that's Bill Bonds is quite a character. He both reported the news and made the news quite often around here.
If
But
you hear the doorbell at FedEx,
ah.
I think they might be bringing some emails from Elvis.
Well, hey, I didn't want to keep you too long here. It was great to talk to you. Is there anything else you'd like to discuss or get into before we say goodbye?
Well, no, not really. I mean, I've just been very, very fortunate and have always believed in broadcasting that if you ask, you can get interviews. And I went to the White House and got to interview a group of non-metro news people. Jimmy Carter was the president, and I know he did more after he was president than during, but still, to get picked to go to the White House was pretty good when you can go to your boss and say, hey, the president wants to see me. And he says, what? And I made 2 calls, one to the White House and
That's
another
crazy.
one somewhere else. But I've been so fortunate
Yeah, that's
and
amazing.
have been involved in the JCs and was president of the Make-A-Wish Foundation in Wyoming and Crime Stoppers and just so fortunate. And for a guy who started college and ran out of money and dropped out, I think I did okay. Wonderful career.
Yes, you did, my friend. Even how this happened right now, while we're talking at all, was I had just noticed your name on the Johnny Harra vid, and I'm like, I'm gonna look this guy up on Facebook. And anyone listening, I should tell you, Fred could have big leagued me. Here's just a guy coming at him asking about a video, and he immediately was super nice, and that was yesterday. And here we are talking today. So, man, I really appreciate you, Fred. Congrats on your career and the great interviews, man.
Well, Stephen, it's very nice that you called and we got together, and congratulations on your endeavors there with what you've been doing. I think that's wonderful.
Oh, thank you, sir. Okay, this will be up soon for post, and everybody, have a great week.